Right now, somewhere in your house, there is a predator watching you. It has claws that can open flesh. It has teeth built for killing. It has reflexes faster than almost anything else that lives alongside humans. And you probably just called it over for a cuddle. Your cat is not a pet in the way your instincts want to believe. It is a wild animal that made a decision. Thousands of years ago, that decision changed the shape of human civilization. Why would early humans allow an unpredictable hunter to live inside the walls where their children slept? The answer is stranger than you think. Go back roughly 12,000 years. Humans had just done something they had never done before. They had stopped chasing food and started growing it. This was the Neolithic Revolution, the shift from hunting and gathering to farming. Wheat, barley, stored grain in clay jars and mud brick bins. For the first time in human history, food didn't move. It sat in one place, waiting. Before this, your ancestors followed herds. They followed seasons. They followed rivers and the migration patterns of animals they hunted. Nothing stayed still long enough to attract permanent competition. A wandering band of hunter-gatherers left almost nothing behind for scavengers to build a life around. Farming changed that completely. Villages meant permanence. Permanence meant stored surplus. And stored surplus meant, for the first time, a stationary target. And where food sits, rodents follow. Mice and rats poured into these new settlements like a flood no one had predicted. They ate the grain. They spread disease. They multiplied faster than any human strategy could contain. Early farming villages were, in a very real sense, under siege. Imagine spending months planting, tending, and harvesting a field, only to watch a rodent population devour what should have carried your family through winter. Imagine that happening again the next season. And the next. There were no locks, no sealed containers, no pesticides. There was only the slow, grinding math of loss. Humans tried what they could. Traps, sealed pits, vigilant watching. None of it worked at the scale the problem demanded. Humans didn't solve this problem. Cats did. Wild cats living near these settlements noticed something simple. Grain stores meant rodents. Rodents meant an easy, endless buffet. So the wild cats came closer. Not because humans invited them. Not because anyone planned it. They came because the math of survival pointed them toward the villages. This is where the story breaks from what most people assume. You were taught that humans domesticated cats the same way they domesticated dogs, cattle, or horses through deliberate breeding and control. But geneticist Carlos Driscoll, who led a major study on the origins of the domestic cat, found something different. His research traced the domestic cat's lineage back to a single wildcat subspecies from the Near East, Felis sylvestris libica. The genetic evidence points to a process no human ever directed. Cats domesticated themselves. There was no capture, no breeding program, no moment where a human decided, "This creature will be my companion." Instead, the boldest, calmest wildcats kept approaching human settlements generation after generation. The ones who could tolerate being near people got more food. They survived better. They produced more offspring. And those offspring inherited that same tolerance for human presence. This is a process biologists sometimes call self-domestication. It didn't require cages or selective breeding programs. It only required time, proximity, and a food source that never stopped attracting rodents. Generation after generation, the calmest, boldest cats simply outcompeted their more fearful, more aggressive relatives in this new environment humans had accidentally created. Slowly, without anyone designing it, a wild predator turned into something that could sit beside a human fire without fleeing. You are living with the result of an animal that chose you. In 2004, archaeologist Jean-Denis Vigne uncovered a grave on the island of Cyprus that reframed everything scientists thought they knew about this relationship. Buried together, deliberately, side by side, were a human and a cat. The grave dated back roughly 9,500 years. Cyprus has no native wildcats. That means someone brought this animal there by boat, across open water, intentionally. Think about the logistics of that. A person had to capture or raise a cat, keep it alive during a sea voyage, and consider it valuable enough to bring into a brand new life on an unfamiliar island. Why would ancient people go through that effort for what modern eyes might dismiss as just an animal? Because the cat wasn't just an animal to them. It was protection. It was survival. It was, in some early symbolic sense, family. Think about what that means for a moment. Long before pyramids, long before writing, long before most of what we call civilization, humans were already forming emotional bonds with these creatures, bonds strong enough to bury them together in death. The human in that grave was positioned carefully. The cat was placed close enough that archaeologists immediately recognized intention, not accident. Someone, nearly 10,000 years ago, wanted this animal to remain beside them, even in the afterlife. Now picture Egypt, several thousand years later. Grain storage had scaled up massively. Entire empires depended on surplus wheat surviving the season. And so did the threat from rodents. Cats became something close to sacred. Killing one, even accidentally, could carry the death penalty. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote that Egyptian households would shave their eyebrows in mourning when a family cat died naturally, a small but telling detail about how deeply this animal had embedded itself into daily emotional life. Archaeologist Melinda Zeder has documented how thoroughly Egyptian culture absorbed cats into its religious and symbolic life, from the goddess Bastet to mummified cats buried alongside the wealthy in tombs meant to last for eternity. Temples were built in their honor. Statues were carved. Entire cemeteries have been discovered containing hundreds of thousands of cat mummies, an almost unimaginable scale of devotion for what began as a practical arrangement over rodent control. This wasn't random superstition. It was gratitude encoded into religion. A creature that once hunted in the wild had become powerful enough, useful enough to be worshipped. Isn't it strange that the same instincts that once made cats dangerous outsiders are the exact instincts that made them essential insiders? Here's the twist most people never think about. Unlike dogs, cats were never bred for obedience. Dogs were shaped, generation after generation, to follow commands, to work as partners in hunting, herding, guarding. Cats were never fully rewired that way. Your cat's brain is close to what a wild cat's brain looked like thousands of years ago. That aloofness you notice, that refusal to come when called, that sudden switch from affection to indifference. None of that is a personality flaw. It's ancient wiring, barely touched by domestication, still running in the background of an animal you keep in your bedroom. Compare this to a dog for a moment. A dog's brain, over 10,000 or more years of intentional breeding, was gradually reshaped around cooperation with humans. Dogs read human faces. Dogs respond to pointing gestures almost instinctively. Dogs were pushed, generation after generation, toward partnership. Cats never went through that same pressure. There was no reason to breed cats for obedience, because their usefulness never depended on taking orders. A cat that hunted rodents effectively was valuable whether or not it responded to its name. So the deep behavioral core of the species stayed remarkably intact. When your cat stares at a closed door for no visible reason, that's not random. Wild cats relied on tracking subtle movement and sound to survive, picking up on vibrations and shifts in air pressure long before a threat became visible. When your cat crouches low, wiggles its hindquarters, and then pounces on a toy, that's not cute randomness either. That's a hunting sequence: stalk, crouch, strike, passed down largely unchanged for thousands of generations, rehearsed now on a feather instead of a field mouse. You didn't just adopt a pet. You invited an ancient predator's instincts into your daily life, and it never fully let them go. So why does this matter now, in a world with pest control, sealed grain silos, and supermarkets? Because the bond never depended on necessity in the way you might assume. Once cats attached themselves to human settlements, something beyond survival kept the relationship alive. Companionship. Comfort. That strange stillness a cat brings when it settles onto your lap and you feel your own body slow down without meaning to. Modern research on human-animal interaction, building on the same evolutionary framework Driscoll and Zeter helped establish, has repeatedly found that living alongside cats correlates with lower reported stress and steadier emotional regulation in their owners. A cat's purr sits in a low frequency range that some researchers have associated with physical calming effects, a small biological echo of the comfort your ancestors may have felt sitting near the same sound thousands of years ago. Ancient humans may not have understood the biology. They didn't have the language of genetics or evolutionary self-domestication, but they clearly felt something worth protecting, worth burying beside their own dead, worth writing into their gods. That feeling has not disappeared. It has simply been carried forward, household after household, into your living room. You are not just petting an animal when you scratch behind your cat's ears. You are touching the living end of an evolutionary story that began with grain, rodents, and a wild creature that decided humans were worth the risk. Consider how unusual this actually is. Of the roughly 40 species in the cat family found across the planet, only one chose to live this closely alongside humans, and it did so almost entirely on its own terms. No other wild feline walked toward permanent settlements and stayed. Lions didn't. Leopards didn't. Bobcats didn't. Only this one lineage of small Middle Eastern wildcat made that choice, and it changed the future of an entire species in the process. Every purr, every slow blink, every unexplainable 3 a.m. sprint across your bedroom floor carries that same ancient code. Nothing was tamed out of your cat. It simply chose to stay close enough to watch you, generation after generation, while never fully becoming yours. That balance, wild enough to remain itself, tame enough to remain close, is exactly what has made the relationship last for 10,000 years without ever needing to change its terms. So the next time a predator is watching you from across the room, waiting for you to sit down so it can climb onto your lap, remember what that actually is. It isn't a pet that learned to trust you. It's a wild animal that never stopped being wild and decided thousands of years ago that you were worth staying for.